All right, we are back once again for the Astro Weather. And as you can tell, the earthly weather is still a little bit on the chilly side. It is currently 26 degrees here in good old Kerrville, Texas. And I'm sure for some of you, that just seems, completely balmy and tropical. I'm sure that there are people that are still struggling somewhere between 0 and 10, and perhaps you're watching this transmission. And we hope you all stay warm and safe out there or in there, whatever it is you're doing, as we battle the nucleated snow and the inclement weather from the geoengineering architects of our atmosphere. If you haven't seen the video that Dane Wigington did with Jimmy Dore last week, it's probably worth watching. I interviewed Dane Wigington a long time ago, and I thought he was a really cool guy. And he was one of the first people on board with the whole chemtrail is an issue platform. I mean, there were other people prior to that, like the main guy was this guy named Clifford Carnicom, who was doing a lot of kind of boots on the ground research of the oily residue that the chemtrail dew would make, and putting it on microscopes and running it through testing equipment. And what he found will make your toes curl. And that was way back in 1997. So we have been dealing with this atmospheric chafe, I believe it's how you say it, or chaff, for 2006, 2016, 26, 30 years, nearly half a century of geoengineering and exposure to all kinds of wonderful things like manganese and what else is in there? Let's see, aluminum, iron oxide. They found little nano arrays, pieces of blood with cancer cells in them, just all kinds of wonderful stuff that you can breathe in. And all, that all eventually matriculates into our food supply and into our groundwater. And they wonder why we're sick. I wonder if it has something to do with the weather. In any case, there was a Dane Wigington appearance on Jimmy Dore, which basically says that this is a geoengineered, nucleated blast of snow that is piggybacking on a natural cold front, thus amplifying it and making it more intense than perhaps it might have been, reaching into areas that it may not have reached. So we're in the aftermath of it now, and I hope most of you or all of you have navigated it with a sense of grace and ease and even cooperation. I had some of that the other night. Like I said, I came home from not being here for the weekend and my HVAC was out. It was cold. It was very cold. It's a good thing we have these double paned windows, or else it would have been a lot colder. Anyway, I called the HVAC guy and he was here within 20 minutes. Got into my HVAC, found the issue. It was a burnt wire that had been kind of overloaded and stressed, only because it was old, and replaced it, cleaned it up. And he'll be back in about 3 or 4 months for a maintenance check at a very reasonable rate. So I couldn't be happier that that was the outcome. Coming home to a cold house was, it was a first world, a third world issue in the first world. Let's put it that way, and was able to resolve it. So here we are. It is the 28th of January. So we are we're into Aquarius season. As you may have noticed, the thumbnails tend to have an Aquarian theme. And today, it's a version of the Silver Surfer catching a big wave at Mavericks. And I thought, oh, that'd be kind of a cool image. And to the best of my ability, or to the best of me mind melding with AI, that's what we came up with. And I'm pretty happy with it. Yes, looking back on yesterday's show, I realized that I probably should have talked about Neptune and Aries more, because that is really the astrological news of the day. And I will today. But I have talked about Neptune and Aries kind of ad infinitum. And I've said so much about it. And I think there's still much more to say, to be honest. And if I don't say it, somebody else will. And I'll say, well, I said that. And then I'll kick myself in the butt for not having said it again. So I think we'll talk a little bit today about Neptune and Aries and what we can expect of it. I think that would be a reasonable slice for today's show. Also, there is a link to 15 Minutes of Flame, which is on Rumble. And there is some very, very disturbing news coming out of Washington, D.C. regarding your vehicle that you drive in. And I'm going to break that down for you guys at the just after the top of the hour over on Rumble. The link for Rumble is in the show notes. So if you have any interest in the future of driving and are planning to buy a new car, and I'm assuming that what's in the new cars is also in some of the older cars, and they're just not telling you. They're not keeping you apprised of these technological innovations. So we'll get into some of that over on Rumble today. Just giving you a heads up and a bit of a lead in. And with that, let's see who's in the clubhouse. The other, I found out, I was looking at the time. I'm like, holy shit, I have this thing scheduled for 8 p.m. tonight. And in a nick of time, I flipped it. So generally what happens is that YouTube sends out notices. And I may have missed the notice window. And that's okay. People will show up because, this is kind of Pavlovian. And, I ring the bell here at 8 a.m. All right. Let's see. Who do we have here? We got DJ MC. I got the Crone Ranger, the California Contrarian, Jam Chloe. Looking forward to my reading later. Yes, Rosie. You are my final reading of the day. I had 5 clients yesterday. It was station to station, man. Totally station to station. The first 2 were regular astrological reading clients, and then the last 3 were coaching clients, which I really enjoy a lot. Yesterday was good. It was really good. Ever since I ran this special, it has just been packed, and I'm still getting back to people. And I had like 0 time yesterday to do that. I mean, I had brief hourly increments, and during those little increments in between, because I try to give myself an hour, like eat something, hit the head, and kind of look at the charts and prep a little bit. You know what I mean? Like that hour comes in handy, but I can't do anything really administrative during that hour. I just don't have enough time. Julie Sunshine 333 is here. Cold enough to freeze boogers. Ooh. Frozen Booger. That sounds like a bad early 70s band. Charlie's here. Let's see. Pristine blue skies. Feels amazing here on the Gulf of America. Right on, Charlie. Barbara still has not gotten her driveway open. That's a lot of hard work. Should get the G-Man over there. Let it put some of that muscle into it. There's Mark S. What's going on, Mark S? Ms. Behaving Too and Miss Nikki. Josie's Jazzy Junk. As an Aquarian, I'm looking past the surfer to the starry cloud formation that just demands my attention. Yeah, it came out pretty well, didn't it? GM McCarthy World, what's going on? I know who you are. Good to see you, Beth Berry. Beth is here to Bisu. Jay Schaefer. Hey, Jay. Going to be 70 in Tucson. She's bragging. Jay's bragging. You got bragging rights. Janine's probably not that far behind you. Hi, Janine. Good to see you. Question: has anyone noticed how often television now has the color turquoise to steel blue variation in all the shows, the ads, and the films? I don't watch much TV at all, but I've noticed it. I'll pay attention. I'll pay attention to that color palette. There's our man, Steve Thor by the door. What's going on, brother? Lena Winkler's here. Moira, NYC, all frigid outside, but warm and cozy in. Neil Smith is with us. Maya Rose, Christine Foos. La Chica Gitana, checking in from Wisconsin. Let's see, Road Trip. Hi, darling. Listening, working. I saw the video, Robert, and shared with those that are in the middle of waking up. Some said thanks. Good. Amy V. Hi, Amy. Oh, it's payday for Charlie. Stay away from the casino. They'll take your money. Sharon Lewis, just listened to Redacted, talked about the intense chemtrails spreading everywhere and what's in the chemtrails. It's not good. It is a viral cocktail you want no part of your body partaking in. David Flores, greetings, David. Teresa, love the cold here. And I'm in SoCal, 70s all week. There you go, a brisk 70 degrees in Southern California. I like cold and sunny, just like my disposition. It's so funny. Really good. Let's see. Can I still own my 03 and 14? I assume that's cars. The 03 is probably okay. The 14... you might have to have a deeper dive on that. Perspectivized, Lisa Ann White. There's the lovely and talented one. Listening, driving. We got Vance Morishige. Let's see, on October 29, 2020, a wave height record was set at Nazar, Portugal, and that same day, an 18-year-old surfer rode the highest wave thus recorded. 2 world records were set that day. That takes some cojones. Let me tell you. Sue Leonard. Hi, Sue. Checking in from down under. Jackie in NYC. Is that right? Hi, Jackie. Oh, it's Jen. It's Jen Quincy. Jen Quincy. Hi, Jen. Hi, did you get the film link? The film link. I'm not sure. Where did you send the film link to? Well, don't Seahawks and Pats have a variation of that color? The Pats are kind of teal. I'm sorry, the Seahawks are teal and blue and green. Teal, blue, and green. So they do fit that color scheme. The Pats are red, white, and blue. Let's see. Ann Boof. Hello, Ann Boof. Esperanza. What's happening? The lovely Esperanza. Liddy Lou in the house. Hi, Liddy Lou. The new next pod. Get some Silver Surfer action. There you go. Maybe with Pluto and Aquarius, we'll see that color now. Metallic blue. It's interesting, these color schemes and how there are definitely decades where color schemes become part of the general palette, right? Like if you go back into the 70s, we all know what the 70s were like. Mustards, browns, avocado, earth tones, gold, perhaps a splash of maroon every now and then, right? That was the color palette of the 70s. And it sort of matched in some ways like the inception of the whole Earth catalog. I mean, they were very earthy tones. I remember growing up as a kid, we had shag carpet. It was gold. And yeah, those were the times. The 80s, the color palette changed. And there's an actual name for the 80s color palette. I think it's like Miami something. I forget the second part of that name. But when we get to the 80s, everything becomes kind of shockingly neon with pinks and turquoise and lime greens. What else? Some shades of, did I say pink? Pink is in there. Pink, orange, turquoise, lime green. That's your color palette of the 80s. There's a name for it. It's called Miami something. And every decade kind of has their own color palette. When I think of the 90s, I just think of black. I think of black in the 90s. The 90s were dark, man. They were dark, but I like the 90s. I think the 90s are really underrated as a decade. There were a lot of good movies in the 90s. There's a lot of fluff cinematically in the 80s. And even musically, the 80s are kind of fluffy. I mean, it's like the poofy hair. The poofy hair and the blouses with shoulder pads. The 80s were poofy. And then the 90s got gritty. The 90s got gritty. The music got gritty. Movies were gritty. You had the X-Files. 90s were underrated. 90s were like an echo of the 70s. Okay, should we talk astrology? Why don't we bring up the chart of the day here? We're 19 minutes into the show, and I should probably talk some astrology instead of interior design. Let's see. What do we got here? There we go. Is that it? Let me just make sure that's it. Because usually what happens, I got to burn the first one. Well, I want that. But are you going to be able to see it? The answer to that is absolutely not. So let's try this again. And take two. There we go. That's where we are on the wheel. And let's zoom in a little bit, get you guys. And I can even make myself a little smaller. Why didn't I do that? I'll make myself a little smaller. Here we go. All right, let's talk about Neptune and Aries. Right there. And I have these transits here. The transits are just what's on the inside. So the first thing that pops into my brain is this whole thing with ice in Minneapolis. And it's like Neptune and Aries defrosted ice. Do you know what I mean? So it depends on what news outlet you read or you watch. The reports vary. There are some reports that are stating that ice is completely withdrawn from Minneapolis. It's interesting that ice and Minneapolis kind of go together because I think Minneapolis is being very cold. But there are some other outlets that say, well, it's been a partial withdrawal. And I think it's really interesting that we had a lot of this hubbub and furor taking place on the streets of Minneapolis when we had that Saturn and Neptune conjunction at the end of the zodiac in Pisces. And, the borders really bled when Neptune went into Pisces. And for some of you who have been around long enough, I had about a 24 show stint over on Gaia. And it was looking ahead at Neptune in Pisces, and I brought up the whole immigration thing with Neptune in Pisces. This was, I mean, I'd like to think it was before other people were talking about it, particularly in astrological circles. And I think that show is still on Gaia. So if you're a member, you can go watch it. And, I've talked about this before, but the most famous image of the whole migration operation was a boat called Aquarius. And Aquarius ferried like thousands and thousands of quote unquote refugees from Africa to Europe. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, this is a really interesting symbol, and I just knew that the wave of migrants was coming, literally a wave, because they were coming across the ocean. They were coming across the water. And Pisces was literally and figuratively the delivery mechanism for migration. And of course, people, would be their Christianity and their compassion, their altruism would be weaponized. And they didn't know it was coming. They just thought, oh, look, this is a new thing, and these people need a place. And they thought, well, it's just going to be a limited number of people, and we can welcome them, and we'll send our women down to the dock to put leis of flowers around them and hug them and welcome them. It was not a limited hang. It was wave after wave after wave after wave. And it was all Neptune and Pisces. And it's interesting now that we have Neptune and Aries, and it's like we reach this sort of denouement. It's like enough, right? Enough. Like the Neptunian sponge is filled. We can't absorb anymore, right? And Saturn is the government. Saturn is hierarchies coming in and saying, look, we have to insert some order into this, right? And this is what was happening at these final degrees. It just, when you think, all right, they're really going to make a dent. They're going to stand up to a dipshit like Tim Walz, who, if you, and I spent a lot of time breaking down Tim Walz and his connections in China, and just pardon my language, what a fucking creep he is. I mean, Tim Walz is a creep. And I was never so happy as to watch him sweat his tiny balls off when he debated J.D. Vance. And I'm not the biggest J.D. Vance fan, but I was definitely on Team Vance that night. But when you look at who's in power in that part of the world, Jacob Frey, Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and then a number of other players who we're not aware of, it seems as though they have achieved a victory. And with Neptune and Aries, we're just using this event as an example. Is that a smokescreen? Because you'll get that with Aries sometimes. With Neptune, pardon me, with Neptune. You'll get that with Neptune sometimes. Neptune will be kind of like a smokescreen. It'll be an illusion. So is the illusion based on a partial pullout or a pullout? And are they going to rope-a-dope Minneapolis when Saturn comes into Aries, and it's like, well, you thought you got rid of us. Well, you didn't, right? I mean, it's quite possible. I really don't think any agreement, whether it just feels like agreements are really fluid, and especially when Saturn goes into Aries and it conjuncts Neptune, Saturn is compacts and contracts, and conjunct Neptune, there's a lot of interpretation about agreement. So I'm wondering if this is a bit of a rope-a-dope. And once Saturn goes into Aries, they go back into Minneapolis. Because I think, and again, I talked about this a bit yesterday. I'm kind of over this shit. You know what I mean? I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of over this drama. And unfortunately, it's probably just beginning in a much bigger way. If we're talking Neptune 0 Aries, echo of the Civil War in Fort Sumter, that this is really, in a lot of ways, an echo of the Civil War. And it is a Civil War. And it's not based on whatever kind of issues were tossed about, to justify the Civil War. But it is a Civil War nonetheless. Right? It is brother against brother. And if some of those people are your brothers, I mean, in a metaphorical sense, but if they're your brothers, you may want to check the source of their patronage, if you know what I mean. Maybe somebody was a stand-in there. Someone over on Facebook sent me one of those group mugshots of all these people that got arrested. And when I first started to see these people back in 2020, I'm like, these people they're bizarre looking. They're really bizarre looking. They don't resemble normal humans. And it's like, are these the misshapen faces of alienation? Is this what happens? Does the human form become so distorted because the spirit within has become so alienated, or is it a byproduct of vaccines and meth? I don't know, but these people they look like a different species altogether. And it's like they're revolting against humans. It's weird. And maybe they're the byproduct of 30 years worth of geoengineering and the nanotechnology that's gotten inside of them and has altered their cellular structure. I mean, that's quite possible, or very possible. But I'm kind of over it. I'm over it. It's like, okay, all right, Renee Good got shot, and Mr. Pretty got shot. And who are they? Where did they come from? What are their connections? And it's just, the rabbit holes are exhaustive. And I'm really, in a lot of ways, grateful that there are people out there now that are the rabbit hole army. I mean, they're not a organized front in true Aquarian fashion. They're a disorganized front of individuals who have gotten a hold of some tools and can break this shit down. And I am so thrilled that we have these people, because quite frankly, I don't want to, it comes down to time, right? Am I going to spend 5 hours of my day working with clients and then at night try to catch up on, just the mechanics of booking people and getting back to people? And then if I have a little bit of time, eat some dinner before I program the next day's shows. Like, I just don't have the time to do a lot of spelunking like I used to. So I'm grateful for these people, because I'm also kind of over it. Like, okay, it doesn't match up. It doesn't line up. What does it mean? Who's behind it? Is there coercion on both sides? Which I think is a really interesting and important question to ask. Is there coercion on both sides? Or is what we're witnessing more of an attempt to split the country in two and break it apart, versus having some form of definition and order, the restoration of real civil rights, not uncivil rights, which is kind of what we've been experiencing. And what were the words out of Kash Patel's mouth yesterday? Not yesterday, the day before. The Second Amendment is now under a microscope. because Jacob Pretty brought a gun, which he legally owned, right? And you can bring a gun to a protest. There's nothing that says you can't bring a gun to a protest. Now, what happens when you do that? Well, we're in new territory there. But I remember this was back in like 2016, and we went down to the Capitol building, and something was going on. I forget what. But something was going on. Went down to the Capitol building. There wasn't a whole bunch of people out there protesting. I forget what it was. But there were these guys that would walk around, with their AR-15s slung around their shoulders. And they did it all the time. Right? That was their public act to remind people that you can do that. I'm like, well, that's pretty brazen. I get it. And, point made. So Jacob Pretty had a handgun. It was a shitty handgun. It's like, why would you have a shitty handgun? I've seen it. It wasn't it was a 9mm. It's like, it's not nines are okay. They're good. Don't get me wrong. But not this one, right? If you want to get a really good one, you go out and you get yourself a Glock. Period. End of story. Some people might have a different version, but this was no Glock, I'm telling you. Anyway, he can do that. And now Kash Patel comes out and says, we have to look at the Second Amendment. And you're living in the Pluto and Aquarius world where the NRA backs Jacob Pretty. And that is so Pluto and Aquarius. It's like, hey, that's his right. He has a right to carry that gun. And it's not even constitutional carry. He had a license to carry that gun. You see, this is a Neptune and Aries effect, because Aries is all about guns and martial activity and, police presence and everything associated with Aries, the army, right? Enforcement. And here's Neptune. And the thing with Neptune is that it is so obtuse at times that there's a level of justification, right? And then there can be real zealotry with Neptune, real zealotry, and straight out of the gate, yeah, we got to do something about that Second Amendment. From Kash Patel. No, Kash. Sorry, cash out. He weirds me out. What is this guy doing as the FBI director? It's amazing. You know what? It's amazing for me. What is amazing? Like, if I was in his position, and I would never be in his position, but if I was, I'd be in way over my head. Way over my head. And I would know that I was way over my head. And knowing that I was way over my head, I'd probably want to get out, because I wouldn't want to drown under my own inexperience and incompetence. But not this guy. Not this guy. He's in way over his head. He knows it. But as long as he's got this incredible fake it till you make it countenance, like he'll stare into the camera and he doesn't blink. It's like whoever blinks first loses. I think he's got that thing down. He just doesn't blink. It's like he is just not going to blink in the face of his own incompetence. I may get a knock at the door. But this is Neptune and Aries, right? There's a lot of obfuscation and justification. And, they're already murmuring, oh, that's Second Amendment. Greenblatt, isn't his name? Greenblatt from the ADL. talking about, oh, we've got all these people, we've got 150 people working and tracking. We're looking at bank accounts, and we're going to debank people for criticizing Israel and bringing up this just ridiculous idea that Israel somehow is overrepresented in our government. And we know we've got the banking numbers, and we can debank that. I mean, he was saying this yesterday. So it's not just the Second Amendment, it's the First Amendment that's under fire. And remember, Aries is the individual, right? That is me and you, right? It is the individual. And we have Neptune coming in here, and it's like, there's any layer of justification to thwart the individual's rights, especially with Saturn. Here comes Saturn. Saturn's the hammer. Saturn's the hierarchy. Here comes the judge. I don't think it bodes very well, to be quite honest with you. I mean, and this is just a layer of the Neptunian expression in Aries, just one layer. Of course, there's others. It's finding out who we are as individuals in the face of obliteration and fear, which is really what Neptune brings about, right? And again, there's also a real zealous quality to Neptune. It's crusader energy, right? So you'll get some people get all fired up. You'll get other people who are like, oh, I'm in retreat mode, man. This is getting a little too crazy out here. And it's going through ultimately the fourth house of the United States of America. And Neptune transits of the fourth house, they're not easy, especially in Aries. It's like the war comes home. And if you look at what's happening in Somalia, or rather Minneapolis, it is an iteration or a variation of the war coming home. Because, if you look at, Somalia, the 90s and early 2000s, a brutal place. Multiple civil wars. You got warlords. You got Black Hawk Down. You've got the UN forces going in there, United States. It was ugly. It was an absolute war-torn country. And of course, those conflicts are generally aided and abetted by multinational corporations who have a vested interest in resources. And if you destabilize the leadership, it's a lot easier to go in and tap those resources. And the result is you have hundreds of thousands of people, Somalians, coming to this country. And don't think that they don't remember being in a war-torn country and their lives being a living hell, and tracing it back to the imperialism of the United States, who is, if it was a pack of dogs, and we'll say the UN peacekeeping forces or NATO, whatever kind of conglomeration of troops that were there in Somalia, the United States is the biggest dog, right? So when this happens, it's like the war comes home. And you can see some of this to a certain degree with the influx of so-called Arabic and Muslim people, particularly the Afghanis, most recently, and some of them have shown up to be kind of violent, right? I wonder why. Because there's a grudge there. And it's just, I think it's the greatest form of diplomacy, is to welcome people into the country that hate you. Not all of them do. I don't want to, paint such a broad stroke, but because I've run into some people that were beautiful. Yeah, I had a Somalian Uber driver one time when I was in, where was I? I was in Boulder. I was doing a guy, lovely guy, happy to be here. Really, happy to be here. Ran into another Uber guy from Iraq a long time ago. Thrilled to be here. It beats the hellhole that we turned those places into. Thrilled to be here. So Neptune's going to be in Aries for 15 years. 15 years. And just before Neptune moves into Taurus, Pluto will make its move into Pisces. And that Pluto transit is it is a major transit, Pluto in Pisces. It is really, all of this that we're living in now really starts with Pluto and Aries. Right? It all starts with Pluto and Aries. When I say this, I'm not talking about the Revolutionary War, which is primarily Pluto and Aquarius. And then, after that with Pluto and Pisces, you're talking about, the Second Industrial Revolution, the financial weight of the Astor family making its presence known. It's like it's the beginning. Pluto in Aries is kind of the beginning, even though it's not the 20th century, it's kind of the beginning of the 20th century. Pluto in Aries is the beginning of the modern world. And Pluto in Pisces is kind of the end of that story. So, between this 14-year cycle and I think what it is, a 13-year cycle, Pluto in Pisces, basically 27 years. I don't think I'm going to have to worry about that. And I'm not sure if I'll be around that long. And if I'm here to see it, well, I'll be really surprised, I'm sure. Who knows? Maybe I'll automatically revert back to 30 again. And it'll just be a byproduct of whatever happens with the ionosphere or the oxygen levels. Here you go. Return to youth. Oh, I'm glad I waited. So it's going to be interesting with Neptune and Aries. And I really feel like the other part of this that is incumbent upon all of us is to watch out for the programming. Because Neptune and Aries, it's like grabbing a hold of your energy and almost hypnotizing you into some kind of cause, some kind, it's sort of like being incensed enough to join some kind of an army, right? I mean, that's Neptune and Aries energy. And so I'm like, just keep an open eye here. Keep an open eye. Watch for the forces of psychological, really, really deep psychological manipulation based on belief systems and based on, which is adjacent to that, might is right and God is on my side. And that may be true in some cases. In other cases, just a projection. And a projection shared by many people because they're just fed up. And that's just the way it is. Okay, we got the moon in Gemini today. I'd say by and large, today's energies are quite good. There's very little conflict in the sky. We're working out our relationship to the new time. Now that Mars has passed over Pluto, the only sort of planetoid asteroid that is yet to go through Pluto is Juno, which you can see here. And once Juno passes through Pluto, this progression from Capricorn to Aquarius will be complete. And fascinating how fast Pallas has moved too. And I think Pallas in Pisces is kind of this collective psychic opening, right? Especially as it gets close to that true node. And the nodes are lunar, And when we dive into the nodes, it's our intuition that guides us, right? Especially with that true node. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Can I handle this? That south node feels really comfortable. I know what that's like. But the true node is the undiscovered country. And so in Pisces, a lot of it has just been operating on faith and intuition that you're heading in the right direction. You're like a turtle that just popped out of the sand and you're walking towards the ocean. You don't know where the hell you're going, but you know there's an ocean there. It's probably in your best interest to get there and get there as fast as possible, because somewhere in your little turtle DNA, you realize you could be lunch. And that is the true node in Pisces. And that's what we've been doing. Here comes Pallas, and Pallas adds a psychic wallop, right? And, this is indicative of a number of people having the same dream, along those lines. So the psychic vibes in the air are quite high. But I say by and large today, even though it may be frigid, it's a good day. And the moon in Gemini allows you to play with emotional perspectives where you're not attached to it, and very observational. I always like Gemini moon days to be around kids. So if you have the pleasure to be around kids that are playful and curious, today's a really, really good day. Really, really good day. Okay, why don't we get into the star of the day? Let's do that. Just a meditation. Today's meditation on Neptune and Aries, because I didn't really go there yesterday, but I hope you appreciated today's discourse. So let me bring the banner up. Here we go. And let's bring up our True Hemp Science star of the day. And today's True Hemp Science star of the day is John Perkins. There were a number of people today that were interesting. Today is the birthday of the French author Colette. Now that is a life. Holy shit. Never read any of Colette's material. Being an English major, you're kind of aware of Colette. Kind of a precursor in some ways to Anais Nin. A lot of erotica in Colette. And she pulled a lot of that erotica from her own life. Boy, was she an experimenter. Anyway, John Perkins is the guy we're focusing on today. And of course, this brief section is brought to you by True Hemp Science, your one-stop shop for all things CBD. And it's times like these where CBD is an ally, a real ally, whether it's the sleep gummies, whether it's their daytime gummies, whether it's the tinctures right here. Adding CBD to your healthness regimen is a real added bonus. It actually lubricates your cellular structure and works with some very interesting receptors in your brain. So I highly recommend CBD, and what I would classify as the best CBD on the internet. True Hemp Science. Go there now. Take part in the first-time buyers program. Get 20% off. Type in 15MINS. Get a goodie bag on top of that, and you are winning. TrueHempScience.com. All right, let's talk John Perkins. Who is John Perkins? John Perkins is the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He's a very interesting character. When I look at his face, he has kind of the face of like a Joker, doesn't he? He's got kind of a Joker profile. He also reminds me a little bit of Founding Fathers energy. Now, the story behind John Perkins is that he worked for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And what he would do is he would go into countries and sometimes set plans in place for certain countries to experience economic hardship. And in other cases, the economic hardship was already there. And what John Perkins would do is he would come in and he would have these meetings with mostly South and Central America, by the way. And he would go in and have these meetings, and he would talk to whoever was the so-called leader at the time and said, hey, we can bail you out. Well, who's we? Well, it's the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and we're put together to help struggling countries and struggling regimes get their footing by infusing capital into your monetary system. And oh, really? Well, that sounds really good. We're not doing so well. Spent a lot of money killing a bunch of people to become the leader of this country, and I'm just kind of out of it. No worries, got you covered. Here's what we'll loan you. And here comes this money, and it's like, wow, what do I have to do for it? Well, not a whole lot, but anytime that there is a vote at the UN that we want you to vote for or against, you will. And oh, by the way, there's this little thing about resources. What do you mean resources? Well, like your resources. We own them for perpetuity. What? But perpetuity, what does that mean? It means forever. Well, I can't do that. Well, then I can't initiate a loan to you. Of course, it'll be a loan for, $1.5 billion. I can't do that. If you're a despot of a country, you're thinking $1.5 billion. Well, that'll set me up. That'll set me up for life. I'll be able to build an army. I'll be able to pay off people that want to acquire my position. There's a lot of things I can do with $1.5 billion. And let's be honest, if I manage it well, I can die as the ruler of this country. And when that's done, I won't have to worry about what happens to this country. I mean, really, that's the psychology. And this is what John Perkins did until he didn't, until he woke up. And I feel like it's really interesting because he's got his son in the 6th house in Aquarius. When I think of the 6th house, I think of like the common man. I think of, people at nail salons and baristas. And I think ultimately this is where John Perkins found his humanity. And you can even see like with other people's money, right? Like he's got the 8th house, he's got Venus and Pisces. And he's got that square with Saturn. And then down below, he's got this opposition with Jupiter in Virgo. So this is a T-square. And down in the 2nd house, those are hard assets, right? Those are hard assets. And I'm going to go with Venus in Pisces in the 8th house as being John Perkins' conscience. Right? Like he could be at a certain point kind of really slippery with Venus there and knowing full well what these people were getting into. But I think he woke up. And the other part of his awakening is that Pluto moon conjunction and Pluto opposing the sun. And again, Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio and the 8th house, other people's money, he He got tired of the scam. He could not live with himself. John Perkins developed a conscience. And I think some of that can also be exhibited with his true node in Cancer, right? And that south node in Capricorn. He came in on that south node in Capricorn and he knew how to do this shit, right? He could work the numbers with Mercury conjunct the south node. He could work those numbers and enforce them with Mars conjunct the south. He was wired for that gig. He came in from kind of an elite level. And there's the hitman part. But ultimately, he couldn't do it anymore because his true node is in Cancer and not Capricorn. He went over, right? We talked about this intuitive journey across the chart into the true node. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of fucking people over here. That's what's happening. And even Uranus in his 10th house, which represents a radical change in his career path, and really coming in pretty strong with Neptune and the sun. And he, he's gone on to champion, I would say, kind of more democratic and progressive causes. I think he was involved with the Pachamama people in Berkeley. So he went from being a full-on capitalist executioner to being somebody who was way more concerned about social justice. And at the end of the day, I'll probably take the latter over the former because at least he can live with himself. And if you haven't read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I highly recommend it. He really gets into the nuts and bolts of, how these contracts and deals are set up. And like a true Aquarian, he became a contrarian. And he said, enough is enough. And he spent the rest of his life trying to help the people of the countries and the cultures that he put under the hammer of the World Bank and the IMF. So, tip of the cap to you, John Perkins. You can rest your head on your pillow and sleep at night and wake up the next day with a sense of purpose and a clear conscience. That'll do it. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the weather. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And if you feel like buying me a cup of coffee, there's a link in the description for the show. And if you're one of the more technologically inclined people who are not afraid of a QR code, it's right there in the frame set of today's show. Thank you all for being here. Come join me over on 15 Minutes of Flame. And I will share with you the shocking news about the vehicle you're driving in. You'll never start up and buckle up the same way again. Take care. Love you all. Bye for now.